The desert sun blazed across northern Syria as a black-clad figure lifted a knife to the throat of a kneeling man. A camera rolled silently, its lens cold and unblinking. The man's breathing quickened, but he didn't beg. Behind the camera, someone whispered in Arabic, "Keep it steady." Moments later, the world would witness one of the most chilling acts of modern terrorism, the ISIS beheadings. The video that shocked millions began with calm precision. A masked militant in all black stood beside a Western hostage dressed in an orange jumpsuit, mirroring the uniforms once worn by detainees in Guantanamo Bay. The message was deliberate. This was revenge. The hostage, identified as journalist James Foley, spoke in a steady, almost rehearsed tone, his voice trembling only slightly. He had been forced to read a script, words written by his captors, blaming his own government for his impending death. Moments later, the militant S-knife gleamed in the harsh light as he delivered the speech that would echo across the world. His accent was unmistakable. British, clean, and composed. This was Jihadi John, later identified as Mohammed Emwazi, a 26-year-old from London who had become the face of ISIS brutality. Foley's abduction dated back to 2012. He had been covering the Syrian civil war, driven by a deep sense of purpose and compassion. He believed the world needed to see the human cost of the conflict. On November 22, 2012, while traveling near Raqqa, his convoy was stopped by armed men. His driver and translator were released, but Foley was taken. For nearly 2 years, his family received no real information about his fate. He vanished into the growing shadow of ISIS's territory. By 2014, the group had transformed from a fragmented insurgency into a brutal proto-state. With slick media production, English-speaking recruiters, and a twisted message of divine purpose, ISIS began using fear as its greatest weapon. The beheadings weren't random acts of savagery. They were propaganda, crafted to terrify, recruit, and manipulate. Each video was choreographed like a performance, complete with scripts, cinematic angles, and controlled lighting. The hostages were chosen for maximum global impact. Journalists, aid workers, and citizens from nations involved in bombing ISIS targets. After James Foley's execution, the world reacted with outrage and horror. Governments vowed justice. But the group was prepared. Just 2 weeks later, another video surfaced, the execution of Stephen Sotloff, an American-Israeli journalist. Then came David Haynes, a British aid worker, Alan Henning, Peter Kassig. The pattern became grimly familiar. A calm hostage, a speech of condemnation, a hooded killer, the black flag of ISIS waving in the wind behind them. The man known as Jihadi John became a symbol of pure terror. Intelligence agencies raced to identify him. The CIA, MI6, and GCHQ collaborated, analyzing his voice, height, and background noise from the videos. Linguists pinpointed his accent to West London. It matched the speech patterns of Mohammed Emwazi, a Kuwaiti-born Briton who had studied computer science at the University of Westminster. He wasn't from a war-torn background. He'd grown up in a quiet London neighborhood, played video games, and complained about being harassed by British intelligence after traveling to Tanzania in 2009. That resentment festered. Online, he found others who shared his anger. By 2013, he had slipped out of the UK, entering Syria through Turkey, where he joined ISIS and rose quickly through its ranks. For ISIS, Emwazi was perfect. He spoke the language of the West and understood its media. He wasn't just a killer, he was a weaponized voice. Every video he appeared in spread like wildfire online, shared across news networks and social media platforms, amplifying the group's message far beyond the Middle East. They didn't need to win battles. They needed to win attention. Fear was the currency. The hostages were held in horrific conditions. Survivors later described the Beatles, a group of 4 British jihadis who guarded and tortured Western captives. Emwazi was their leader. They used beatings, mock executions, and psychological torment to break their prisoners. One hostage later recalled hearing Foley whisper prayers in the darkness, comforting others even as his own fate grew clearer. Another described Emwazi as cold, calm, and methodical, like he was acting out a role. By 2015, coalition forces had begun striking ISIS targets across Syria and Iraq. Their territory began shrinking, but the propaganda didn't stop. In fact, as their strongholds fell, the videos became even more desperate and grotesque. Civilians, soldiers, and even children were used in their films. The group built studios to produce high-definition videos with slow-motion effects, background music, and English subtitles. It was modern terror, digital, cinematic, and viral. Behind the scenes, American intelligence traced the digital breadcrumbs. They monitored servers, message boards, and encrypted chat rooms used by ISIS media operatives. In late 2015, they finally confirmed Emwazi's location through intercepted communications and drone surveillance near Raqqa. On November 12th, a U.S. drone strike hit his convoy. Hours later, Pentagon officials announced they were reasonably certain Jihadi John had been killed. For many, it was justice, but it came too late for those who had died on camera. Yet, even in death, Emwazi's impact endured. His image continued to appear in recruitment propaganda. His masked face turned into a symbol of resistance for extremists. The videos he starred in were replayed endlessly across dark corners of the Internet, inspiring new recruits from Europe and the United States. The FBI estimated that more than 30,000 foreign fighters had traveled to Syria and Iraq, many drawn by the very videos that made ISIS infamous. What made those films so effective wasn't just the violence. It was the psychological manipulation. They presented ISIS as powerful, organized, and unstoppable, feeding the illusion that joining them meant becoming part of something larger than oneself. Media analysts later noted that the videos mirrored Western action films. Slow pans, dramatic speeches, heroic framing. It was terrorism wrapped in Hollywood technique. When the truth about the captives' final days emerged, it was even darker. Many had been moved between prisons, sometimes blindfolded for weeks. They formed small bonds, whispering stories of home or faith in the moments before being separated again. Foley's last words to his fellow hostages, according to one survivor, were simple. "Stay strong. Don't let them take your hope." The families of the victims endured years of silence and frustration. U.S. policy forbade ransom payments, leaving them helpless as their loved ones' fates played out on the world stage. Foley's mother later said she received an email from ISIS weeks before the video was released. It was taunting, cruel, and final. The message ended with a line that still haunts her. "You will never see him again." As the Islamic State collapsed in the years that followed, many of those involved in the propaganda machine were captured or killed. The surviving Beatles were eventually brought to trial in the United States. In 2022, Alexander Cote and El Shafi El-Sheikh faced American justice, convicted for their roles in the murders of Western hostages. During the trial, the victims' families sat silently as recordings and testimony revealed the full horror of what had happened inside ISIS prisons. The testimonies weren't about vengeance, they were about truth. In the end, the story of the ISIS beheadings wasn't just about the cruelty of one group. It exposed how terror could evolve in the digital age, how cameras, social media, and global news could be turned into weapons. ISIS understood something chilling, that fear spreads faster than bullets. By broadcasting their crimes, they infected millions with dread, suspicion, and hate. But there's another side to the story, one that rarely makes headlines. Even as those videos spread, journalists, aid workers, and local civilians risked their lives to expose the truth. They kept filming, reporting, and rescuing people in ISIS-controlled areas. Their courage stood as quiet defiance against a movement built on intimidation. When James Foley's family established the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, they did it to continue his mission, to protect journalists, demand accountability, and remind the world that truth is stronger than terror. In one of her last public statements, his mother said, "They tried to silence him, but they only made his voice louder." That's the legacy the killers could never erase. Behind every gruesome image, every headline, there was a person, a son, a daughter, a friend, who believed in something better. The world may remember the black-clad executioner, but history will remember the ones who refused to be broken. The desert that once echoed with the cries of the condemned now lies silent, scattered with the ruins of the so-called caliphate. The flag that once symbolized fear now lies buried under sand. The cameras have stopped rolling, but the story remains, a reminder of how easily evil can mask itself in spectacle, and how, even in the darkest corners of humanity, courage can still flicker through. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.